Namaste. Welcome to Wise Out Career Guide. Today we have Mr. Anisu Varghese with us. He is an award-winning internal communications leader and author, writer, blogger, storyteller, and an expert in the field of internal communication. Welcome, sir.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, sir, before we go into your journey, for our viewers, could you help us with your educational background?
Absolutely. So I have an MBA and I have a PhD as well. So when I obviously started my career, I already had completed my MBA.
Okay. So your first job was after your MBA?
Absolutely. Yes. It was in
Oh,
Dhaka, Bangladesh. So again, I am fluent with Bengali because I was born and brought up in Calcutta, although I'm from the
okay.
south of India, Kerala. But because of my Bengali language skills, they were
Mhm.
open to trying me out, and that's how I landed my first job with Leo Burnett in Bangladesh.
Okay. So, sir, over the years, you've handled various kinds of roles. Could you just, take us through what are these roles?
Right. So I think to help you understand my journey, I wanted to just call out. So firstly, my career started with advertising, but again, to step back, I was always passionate about communications. In school, in
Mhm.
college, I was writing for the college journals, writing for various newspapers like the Asian Age, Statesman, all
Oh,
of that.
wow.
And that, so I constantly built my portfolio of work. Of course, this is obviously pro bono free work, which I was doing for these publications, but I wanted to build a repository, and that's how that was so therefore that was the connecting point of my journey. So I was always interested in communication, writing, all of that. And so
Mhm.
through after my advertising, and then I realized that I needed to broaden my understanding of the communication world, and I discovered my passion for employee communications or internal communications, as it's called. And then I
Okay.
specialized in that. So for the next 10, 15 years, I just deep dove into that particular domain at a time when people were telling me that it was not a worthwhile field to pursue because in India it was very nascent, PR was more popular, it was well paying and all of that. And they told me, you're making a mistake, don't go into this field. And I said, no, I'm passionate about people and I'm passionate about problem solving, so I'd like to continue. So that was the next transition that I did. And then as I started getting deeper into internal comms, I realized that you also need to have a good understanding of other areas like corporate communications, digital marketing, leadership, messaging, storytelling. So I kind of build up all these roles. And then CSR was also another area that I added to my portfolio. So these were the various roles that I played during my journey.
Okay. Sir, when it comes to internal communications, that is something, communication we as a subject, as a thing, we always struggle. And when it comes to internal communication for organizations, it is something that can make or break the organization. So, what do you see the scope of this in terms of job roles?
Absolutely. No, I think you're right because internal communication is known as the glue that holds the organization together. And
Right.
and I think this role and domain was more in the spotlight during the pandemic and post-pandemic because suddenly leaders and organizations realized how valuable it is to keep people connected, when they are working in hybrid, remote ways of operating. And so this domain has suddenly become very, very valuable, and I'm seeing a huge number of roles which have started coming across the globe for internal communication specialist. So it is really about understanding people, understanding the culture, problem solving ideas. How can you get people connected to the purpose of the organization? And that's how internal communications can add value to the organization.
Right. So you've had an experience of internal communication as well as advertising. So, when it comes to marketing and communication, internal communication, these were, traditionally roles of something that the HR was handling. How is this evolving and developing,
Yeah, it's a great
especially after the
question.
pandemic?
Absolutely. No, it's a great question because I think the traditional approach and model is long gone. I think the thought was because it's communication, it should be sitting with the HR team, and that model is no more relevant because the communication function needs to sit where it can make its biggest impact. And most
Right.
organizations, forward-looking organizations, have started evolving that model where they have the comms team sitting within the CEO's office or sitting within the program management office, which is closer to the business, and it gives you a bird's eye view of what's happening. Or sometimes the comms team is even very independent because they don't want to get influenced and in the midst of a lot of political internal games that happen. So just to keep them away from all of that, because they work with a lot of sensitive information, there's a lot of
Right.
insights they get ahead of the times when employees get to know. So therefore, this function is very crucial, and so therefore the old model is no more prevalent.
Okay. So, sir, when it comes to roles of internal communication, what are the qualifications that companies are looking for in freshers?
Uh, well, I think before that, I would like to say that this is it's irrespective of what level you're at. If whether you're fresher, whether you're a seasoned professional, I think organizations are looking for someone who is passionate about this domain, passionate about people, passionate about getting things done. And it's really not about the role, as long as, and you don't really need to have a degree in, say, media or journalism or all of that, because I've seen people from different walks of life who have grown into this role, and they have developed because they are really interested and committed and passionate about it. So I think for a fresher, they just need to have an open mind, saying that if they're really keen about communication, they want to stay in this domain for the long term, then they need to be invested in it.
Okay. So, sir, you've had, experience of working outside India as well. How open are the firms to take Indian freshers in these kind of roles?
Well, I don't think it's about the openness. It's also about what these freshers can demonstrate and show in terms of their capabilities. So what organizations, of course, look for, and because of all the changes we're having with globalization, all of that, organizations are open to looking at talent from around the world. So global talent is definitely much required. And
Okay.
Indians have demonstrated that they can be, the most suited because of their adaptability, their willingness to learn, unlearn, and all of that. So, and you've seen most of the leading brands in the world are now led by CEOs, and we also have a few governments which are run by Indians. So there is an interest and there is an openness to trying it. Of course, some of these countries are willing to first invest in their people, give the jobs to them, and therefore that is the challenge. And sometimes even language is a barrier. So you need to
Okay.
keep that in mind. But I think if you step back and ask the freshers to think about what have they done so far, have they built
Mm-hmm.
a repository and proof that they have solid credentials in their space, despite having not having work experience, then that can give them an advantage.
Sure. So, sir, as you were mentioning, that some of the countries have a language barrier as well. You working in Europe currently, how much of a language barrier is it there?
I would say it's a barrier. I think it's like I said, it's the mindset and the openness for the organization. And
Okay.
most countries are following English as their first language. So therefore,
Hmm.
and we have an advantage because in India we have obviously been, we've learned in the British education system. So therefore, we have that advantage. So it depends on the location. It depends on the country. If they are open to it, then there is obviously a greater chance because English is used as the main medium of communication.
Right.
Some regions and countries do, of course, default to their local language, but it's really not in their best interest to default to their local language because if they are projecting themselves as an international company and having a global reach, then they have to stick to the global universal language, which is English.
Okay. So, sir, in terms of education qualifications, we've discussed what the companies are looking for. But what are the kind of soft skills that are required for the role of an internal communicator in any of the organizations?
Yeah, so I think there are two really few parts. I would say first is the ability to learn, unlearn, experiment. I think that part is crucial. The willingness to go the extra mile, do more than what you're asked to. And sometimes it most people get a bit disillusioned because when they work on a project and sometimes it doesn't see the light of day, they get disheartened. But that is part and parcel of the role. Not everything
Right.
will go into a campaign, or not everything will become an initiative. You may have a great idea, so just the openness to say, okay, let me give it a shot and try it, and in the process I learn something. That is really what is expected. The other parts are adaptability, so to be agile, to have the openness to keep investing in your own development, because the world is constantly changing and you also need to keep investing. And the last is most crucial, is how can you help others succeed? Because if you are not helping others succeed, then you are not growing. So that's how organizations are more tuned towards now.
Okay. So now one of the things that you mentioned is your constant need for learning.
Mhm.
You recently finished your PhD, I think last year.
Yes, it
So,
is.
traditionally, again, we used to think that constant learning and constant upgradation of skills was something that, the doctors or the CAs and lawyers were expected to do. But how is that changing, and why is it necessary to keep, getting into and, learning newer things and doing newer courses?
Right. Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think the reason why I did it is because I was obviously passionate in this area, and I did my PhD because I wanted to bridge the gap between theory and practice, because what you see in the corporate world does not really
Right.
match with what's happening in what's being taught to students. And therefore when they join the workforce, there is a huge gap, and there is
Hmm.
also, they're not able to connect the dots. So my interest was to figure out how we can bridge this gap. So that's how I did this
Okay.
PhD. And I think the role of communications is becoming multi-dimensional, multifunctional. It goes across different boundaries. And so, which when I say
Hmm.
boundaries, communications is not limited to just communications. It has a linkage to culture. It has a linkage to organizational productivity. It has a linkage to
Right.
purpose. It has got so many dimensions to it, which makes it even more valuable and important. And that's what organizations are expecting from the
Hmm.
communicator, that they are able to bring various dimensions to the conversation, and therefore they get a seat at the table. Because if you want to talk to a business leader, you need to talk in their language. You need to understand what they're going through, what are their pain points, what are the challenges, and how you can help solve it. And if you don't know what's happening in the macroeconomic environment, then you are not able to connect the dots and help them.
Right. Okay. So, sir, with your work experience of working in India, outside India, and working in the profile of internal communications where there is interaction with all departments, and all levels, what is that one tip that you would want to give to freshers to be able to succeed in any of the career that they choose to get into?
Great. And yeah, I think the key tip I would say is to become a specialist, become a go-to person, because the world is moving towards specialization, and therefore, if you are not a specialist, people will not be able to recall who you are and what you are great at. And
Right.
I'm also a big advocate of personal branding, both
Hmm.
internally and externally. So inside the organization, you need to be building a personal brand to be recognized as who you are and what you stand for and what we can contribute to. So I think
Right.
I don't know if you've heard of the 10,000 hour rule, which Malcolm Gladwell has written about, and it's about becoming the best and becoming a master in your domain. So you need to invest that 10,000 hours to be seen as an expert and a go-to person. I think that is the first step, or the biggest tip which I would give to freshers. If they don't start building it now, 10,000 hours maybe around 10 years from now. So they need to be invested in one domain.
Right. Okay, sir. Thank you so much for joining us, sir, today and sharing your valuable insights and experience with us. Thank you so
Pleasure.
much.
Thank you so much for inviting me. Thank you, Neha.
So that was Mr. Anisu Varghese sharing with us his experience in the corporate world and how he managed to specialize and become the go-to person when it comes to internal communications. Internal communications as a role is something which is gaining momentum with every passing year because the need to communicate clearly what each department is doing, what are the changes that are happening in them, and how that is going to impact the other departments inside the organization is becoming huge with the technological advancements. The need for being able to communicate clearly within the organization is taking a very major important role. And if you want to make a career in this, as he said, you have to add value, you have to create your own brand inside your organization and become the go-to person. And for that, the 10,000 hours rule that he spoke about is something that you should look up and find out, study, understand it. And as he said, that there is a constant need to upgrade your skills, your knowledge, otherwise, you will not be able to move ahead in whichever field you've decided to take as a career for yourself. I hope this was insightful, and if you have any questions, do write to us in comments below and we'll answer them. Thank you, and do like, share, and subscribe the channel.